Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. The House Ways and Means Committee early this morning, May 14th, approved a tax relief bill, which is expected to be taken up on the House floor next week. Here to talk about that bill is Rohit Kumar. Rohit, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So this was an all-nighter, and there were moments of contention throughout the night. And finally, the committee approved the bill without any changes, and whatever amendments the Democrats had put forth were defeated. I want to get your initial impressions of not only the markup and what's in this bill, and what the next steps are.
Yeah, so no huge surprise that none of the amendments were adopted. That's sort of par for the course. The chairman wants to hold the line. The committee members know going in that we're not going to be voting for any Democratic amendments, and Republicans aren't going to be seeking to make changes by amendment, in front of the full committee. Any changes that need to be made either were made on the front end, um, and then or will be manifested between now and floor consideration. So the bill actually goes to the House Budget Committee next. The House Budget Committee simply ministerially stitches together the various bills from the various committees. Remember, this is the one big beautiful bill. So you got language from the Energy and Commerce Committee on Medicaid, and language from the Ag Committee on Farm Bill, and several other committees together. So that gets stitched up together. And then the plan, but emphasis on the plan, is to go to the House floor next week. And on the tax title, look, I think they did. I would give them credit. They did more than I thought they could. They fit inside their $4 trillion instruction. They accommodated pretty much all of the president's priorities, not permanently, but at least through the duration of Trump's term. Now, of course, the real fight remains: where are they on the House floor? Do they have the votes for this thing? What changes will be made or will need to be made, both in tax and other, to get the 217 votes, which will be a majority at the moment, to get this off the House floor?
And was anything in this bill, or what did the House coordinate with the administration or the Senate? And did they keep the Senate in mind as they were putting this together?
They definitely did. Look, it's not fully pre-baked. That's too much to ask. But there were some clear nods to Senate preferences and priorities in the legislation. For one, the extension of the individual provisions is permanent. That is a huge priority for Senate Republicans. There was a letter signed by several Senate Republicans several months ago now saying permanence is the coin of the realm, and the House accommodated that. Equally, while it was widely reported that the House had been considering limiting the ability of corporations to deduct their state income tax payments, that ultimately was not included. The Senate was rather publicly not enthused about that revenue raising offset. And so you're seeing things like that, where maybe the House, if the House was writing a bill just for the House, might have written it temporarily on the individual provisions or included revenue offsets that the House was comfortable with, that the Senate wasn't. So I think there are some clear signs that some amount, perhaps significant amount of coordination has happened, but certainly not all. There are certainly some things where the Senate is going to have a different point of view or want to do things just differently.
And while there are some issues up in the air, like the salt cap, do you foresee, as the process is now moving along, any other issues coming up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the salt cap is a big one. It's both potentially a lot of money, and some critical votes on the House floor need to be wrestled to the ground in order to get it to the Senate. The Senate, interestingly, is not interested in increasing the salt cap, or Senate Republicans anyway are not super interested in increasing the salt cap. This is really a House issue in the main. I do think, though, that in the Senate, one of the things the Senate Republicans have been very interested in, again in the realm of permanence, is some of the what we sort of euphemistically refer to as the TCJA orphans. That's 174, R&D expensing, bonus depreciation, and the interest limitation rules. The limitation whether it's 30% of EBIT or 30% of EBITDA. Those changes in the House bill, as reported by the Ways and Means Committee, are temporary. You get 5 years of relief through the end of 2029. I well imagine that the Senate is going to take a run at making those changes permanent. There's some of the more pro-growth provisions in the bill, and the Senate has more running room. The Senate's sort of tax instruction is substantially more generous than the House's, to the tune of an additional $1.2 trillion of running room relative to the House. So they may not be able to use all the 1.2, or the House may not be able to accept a $1.2 trillion larger tax reduction than what the Ways and Means Committee has produced. But equally, I would be surprised if the Senate completely acceded to the House's lower $4 trillion number. So the Senate will probably almost certainly have some more running room than the House had. And if they use that running room to make those TCJA provisions permanent, that might be the sort of thing at the end of the day, in a final compromise, the House might be willing to accept.
And final question, I know I am not the first person you've spoken to today. So what are some things that you're saying to companies or messaging that you're conveying to them about this bill?
Yeah, so look, the House bill, relative to expectations, and I say that at least relative to my own expectations, was better than expected when it comes to the business community. Some of the revenue raisers that we really thought were going to be included, whether it was corporate salt or a dramatic expansion of 162M, the non-deductibility of comp in excess of $1 million, or even the excise tax on stock buybacks, all of which have been widely discussed and were reasonably thought to have been included as revenue raisers, those did not appear. And so, from that perspective, it worked out pretty well for businesses, for job creators to be able to kind of continue to plan for the macroeconomic environment, at least as it relates to tax. There are other variables, of course, that are beyond their control. But the tax landscape, if this bill were signed into law as is, would give a pretty stable regime for them to operate. And if the Senate actually makes those three TCJA provisions permanent, a very stable regime, at least the law is written, against which to operate. So I think that's sort of the TCJA provisions, the permanence of that. That's a question I've been getting a lot in the last couple of hours. And then the House went, pretty aggressive on the Inflation Reduction Act. No huge surprise given the politics of it, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Senate was not willing to go quite as far as the House on these IRA changes.
I know that this bill is keeping you and all of our colleagues extremely busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. Thanks, Rohit.
Thanks for having me.
And to our audience, thank you for spending this time with us. Stay with Policy on Demand for more on this tax bill. Take care.